You're listening to Searching for More, a podcast of the Diocese of Arlington. On this episode, Kathleen Wilson, Executive Director and founder of Mary's Shelter, a maternity home in Fredericksburg, Virginia, talks about the reality that women don't want to choose abortion but often feel trapped.
The women that come to us, they are truly desperate. They are not taking or thinking about taking the life of their baby because it's an inconvenience. They're thinking of taking the life of their baby because of their situations, because of, a family that's disowning them, or because of an abusive man that they can't get away from, or because they're afraid that with this child they're going to be living in a tent. How am I going to afford this baby? They're not living a lifestyle of this being an inconvenience for any other reason other than, like you said, really, really true fear of how am I going to do this? And that's where we come in.
Hear Kathleen talk about how Mary's Shelter provides hope and shelter to expectant moms who feel they have nowhere to go. This episode's host is Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer of the Diocese.
Kathleen, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks. It's fun to be here.
So you run a really beautiful ministry that I've learned about, but also just really appreciated since I moved back to this diocese and started working here. It's called Mary's Shelter. It started 14 years ago. Mm-hmm. What were you're the founder, so how did it get its start? What was the impetus for that mission?
A couple of things. I was pretty active in the pro-life movement my whole adult life. I had the opportunity to live overseas for years and be very involved in ministries while I was there and while I was raising my big family. And when I came back to the States from Thailand, even though I had 10 kids at the time, I still felt like there was more that I wanted to do. And I was at a church one day with a few friends, and it was a confirmation, and it was really like a striking by the Holy Spirit. And we talked after Mass about, things that we could do. And we thought, well, let's just pray on opening a maternity home if we want to do something. So we went around to a few organizations like social services and different agencies to see if there was a need for maternity homes. If we built it, would they come? And we found out that the need was so incredibly great that they started giving out our telephone number before we had a 501c or any funding or, anything. And between the three of us who were starting it, I think we had close to 30 kids. Now, at the same time, on Saturday mornings, a few of us were driving up to a Planned Parenthood up in D.C. and just to pray, to be on the side and pray. And we drove up with this woman who was a counselor, and she was amazing and knew exactly what to say. And I knew 1,000% that was not my calling, that I was not meant to be a counselor. And so I would stand on the side and let her do her glorious work while I just, prayed with the folks on the grass. And this one time she kind of grabbed me and she said, that car is circling around the block. That woman wants to come in. You need to go and see what she needs. And I was terrified, and she gave me a little push, and I went. And when I did, the woman kind of rolled down her window, and I said, is this something I can do for you? And she said, well, what can you do for me? And I was silent. I had nothing. I had no idea what I could do for this woman. I thought, I can tell her, I can pray for her, of course, and I will, but she's probably been down on her knees herself, and I didn't know. And I did realize right then and there that people have a gift of counseling, they have a gift of words, and that probably opening that maternity home we were talking about was a better fit for what I could do, because I have lots of energy and I can run around and I can help people, but I didn't want to be responsible for having those right words at that right moment for a woman who was in such a crisis that she was actually walking into a Planned Parenthood.
And, we were talking about this before, but this has been the natural outgrowth of the pro-life movement, that it's grown and really evolved to where it is equally invested in helping these women. I mean, that obviously creates a positive impact on the baby that might have been aborted otherwise. But that's been really fascinating to see, and your life is kind of like an example of that, because you saw that need on your own, and talking with that woman. And it's also showing the church providing very practical services for them.
Right.
So what are some of the practical services that you have at Mary's Shelter?
So when a woman comes to us, we immediately address her needs, because many times, as you know, when a woman comes to us, tons of past, there, and there's lots of dysfunction and maybe lots of abuse, and almost always a lot of abuse. Different layers, maybe with the parents or maybe with boyfriends or somebody. There's lots of dependencies, sometimes drugs, sometimes alcohol. And so what we do is we address those first, and we see where a woman needs to be, and try to help her get the counseling she needs. We're really blessed. We have a Catholic Charities counseling services down in Fredericksburg, and they will see any one of our women free of charge on a moment's notice. So we're really, really incredibly blessed down there, and we utilize the other services as well in the community. So, first we try to work with a woman, and there's that expression, meet her where she's at, but that's really true. And give her a little time to breathe, a little time to get used to her new living surroundings, a little time to get to her doctor. But then we start in with our program, and we have meetings constantly. We have a case manager who works with this woman. We try to direct her. So what are you interested in? Do you have a GED? If they don't have their GED yet, that's the first thing we do. We mandate that they get their GED, because it's amazing how many women come to us that don't have a high school diploma. And then the world opens up to them. It's that watching somebody grow, how excited they are. They invite us to their graduations. They're so happy, and they can move forward from there. So it's all baby steps, and that's the reason why we give 3 years in our homes, because it's not a quick fix. It takes time for a woman to reach educational or employment goals. It takes time, sometimes more than 3 years. But so we just address all of their needs and point them in the right directions, and we love them, and we take care, and we spend a tremendous amount of time just letting them talk to us, and we become like mother figures to them, while they're with us.
So you bring these women. How many homes do you have?
We have 6 locations right now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so we can house in our homes up to 18 families. And I say families because we take in women with as many additional children as she has. We have families there with, 5 kids.
Yeah.
So sometimes we'll take less women because we have to give one of those families a couple of rooms.
Right.
But we also have other programs where we work with women outside of our homes as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned the amount of dysfunction that some of them are coming from. So even if they have children, I assume, teaching them how to be a mom is probably a necessity. What does that look like? How do you and some of the other volunteers work with them to teach them, what it takes to be a good mom?
Well, we teach them by spending a lot of time with them. We do it also through classes we have. We have classes on Thursday nights, and we have classes on Saturday mornings. We bring in speakers from the community. We bring in doulas, and we bring in pediatricians. We bring in folks who work for social services, a gazillion different, who just, sit and kind of work with them and talk to them. If it's a woman that we see needs more, we'll mandate that she gets parenting classes. Most of our moms, though, I will say over the 14 years, it's been a tiny percentage of the moms that don't have that natural instinct right at the beginning. Yeah, it really is. I mean, there's something in a woman that has that natural instinct, and our moms have it as well. Even though they have a lot to overcome in their past, they still have that, and they love their babies. We've never had one woman in 14 years regret having that child.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we've had very few issues of moms not being protective and caring.
That's very good. So how many mothers and children do you think you've helped over these years since you founded it?
Well, we've helped over 350 women now in our homes.
Wow.
Yeah, and over 1,000 children have come with them, and then babies born into the program. So
that's miraculous.
I'm sorry?
That's miraculous.
Yeah, really.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really been something
very
special to be part of. Yeah.
And how old? When was it started? What year?
2006, 2007, right around there.
What great impact in such a short amount of time.
We had our first woman come through. We had one room, one woman.
Wow. Now you have your own story about saving children, not through the moms and stuff, but you've adopted somebody. You mentioned before you have 10 children. Talk a little bit about that experience. So you were living in Thailand, right? When you began your first and adoptive mom. How did that come about?
Well, we actually have 12 children now, so
Okay.
that's
Oh.
kind of, yeah.
We're selling you short there. I apologize.
No, that's okay. That's okay. How did that come about? So we had our first 3 children right away, 1, 2, 3, and my husband and I were actually both raised Catholic, but we were not practicing Catholics at that point. As a matter of fact, we had 5 kids before we were even married in the church.
Wow.
And we were both raised in beautiful Catholic families, but just not a ton of formation,
Yeah.
That's why. It wasn't anything against the church. It was just the lack of really having. And so my husband was away a lot, and even though I had a 3, 2, and 1-year-old, I still felt like I could do a little bit more at that point. And I just decided that I was going to take classes, foster care classes. And the craziest thing is after I got done with those classes, I got a call immediately with 2 little girls, and if I took them, I was going to have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, and an 8-month-old. And we did. We said yes to it, and they were immediately adopted. I mean, it was a terrible situation for those little girls. And so it all just kind of, happened. And then we had this great big family already, and my husband talked to me about putting in for jobs overseas because financially, too, that would have been really helpful for us at the point. And he mentioned Thailand to me, and we just didn't think that that would ever happen until, like these 2 little girls, it did, and we got the call that we were moving to Thailand. And while we were there, I got very involved with a lot of ministries, a lot of different ministries. Very easy to do there, very little red tape. Lots of need, and one of the things I did there was volunteer for a orphanage for babies with AIDS.
Oh, wow.
And I started that right away. And the reason I started it actually was because I was challenged by a missionary who told me that I would not be able to volunteer there because I was Catholic. Now, I was just coming into my faith at that point, and I was easily could decide, well, maybe I'm not, practicing Catholic. But something, again, just kind of clicked, and the more challenged I got, the more I read, and I reached out to friends, and I spoke to priests, and I kept learning the truth about the faith. And I would go back to my good missionary friends and say, thanks, because of you, I'm really learning the truth about my Catholic faith, and it was really quite an experience. But I was able to eventually volunteer at this orphanage. I'm not very tenacious, but I was in this situation about getting in those doors. And I fell in love with these babies, and they really were very sick. And the director there literally put one in my arms one day and, asked me to hold him, and he was a little 2-pound, 2-ounce baby. And he was a little bit bigger at that point, but he was born at 2 pounds, 2 ounces, and he was diagnosed, tested positive for AIDS. And I fell in love with him, and I brought him home. And my kids thought he was like a little doll. And I know it all sounds very crazy, but you can do that in Thailand, especially 20-something years ago. And we weren't living in the city; we were living in the country.
I hear it doesn't work that way here, right?
It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way anywhere else, I don't think, than Chiang Mai in the loosey-goosey times we were there. But
So you ended up adopting that little baby?
We wound up adopting him, and as it turned out, he was not HIV positive.
Wow.
So here in the United States, if a child is born to a mother with HIV, they do a DNA test right away. In Thailand, especially 20-something years ago, they did not do a DNA test. They did a simple blood test. So any child born to a mother with HIV would test positive, showing her antibodies.
Yeah.
But when his own immune system kicks in and her antibodies are kicked out, they could test negative, which they are.
Oh, fascinating.
So he was one of those babies that
what a lucky little kid.
tested negative. And he went into
wonderful.
the Marines. He's a young man who went into the Marines. And
that is beautiful.
It's incredible.
Now, what made you want to volunteer in the first place? You had how many kids when you moved to Thailand?
5.
You had 5. So you had all this free time on your hands.
Yeah.
What made you decide I need to go and volunteer at an orphanage? You're in a country you don't know, right? You have 5 children.
Yeah.
Your husband's working, and traveling a lot and stuff.
Yeah.
What gave you that motivation? That's so inspirational.
Well, I really didn't think about volunteering before I went there. It wasn't closed off. I just gave it no thought. But it really was one of those crazy stories where this woman approached me, and she had a little baby in her arms, and she asked me out of the blue if I wanted to adopt this baby. And she turned out to be a missionary there, and she had this little baby named Grace. who had a story like my son, who was tested positive when she was an infant, and later on her immune system kicked in. And like I said, it was one of those things where when I told her that, gosh, I don't think I'm ready to adopt. I haven't even unpacked yet. I just moved here. She said I can meet her director at this church. And I said, well, I don't go to that church. I go to the little Catholic church. And she kind of, stood back. And that's when told me I couldn't go there because I was
those.
I was Catholic. And, I found it so unbelievable that I just never had that said to me before. So, like I said, it made me a little more interested in getting to this place to meet this woman and see if this were true. But once I opened the door to being there, my entire 6 years there, I volunteered with them. And the director of that Agape home, it's called, the ministry where my son came from, became the closest and dearest of friends. So none of that was true. She didn't feel that way at all.
So that's 6 kids. Where did the other next 6 come from? Did you adopt others in Thailand or?
Yeah. So when we went to do the final adoption for my son, I was with the director of social services in Thailand and my husband. And I made the fatal mistake of saying to her, because where you went for the adoption, it was an orphanage there for older children. And I said, boy, this makes my heart hurt. Like if I was ever going to adopt again, I would adopt an older child. And she said, really? I have an older child for you. And she did. And we met Claudia. Her name was Pan. Her Thai name was Pan. She actually didn't have a formal name. There was no paperwork for her.
Wow.
And so we had her come and stay with us for a while to see if she liked us, because she was a little bit older. She was 12, and she did. The compound we lived in had a swimming pool, and I think that's what sold her on us. And we adopted her, and she's a beautiful, beautiful young woman now. She's still in school. She's going for nursing.
Great.
And she was married. She married somebody in the Air Force, and they have a son, and she lives out in South Dakota right now.
Wow, very cool. It's interesting to see the ripple effects of your generosity. I mean, and just being willing to help people, and that 12-year-old girl, and then what she's doing now and helping others and being a nurse. That's really amazing. So you mentioned something a second ago that made me think of this. The desperation that people feel when they're having a pregnancy that they can't afford or don't want, whatever the case may be. That's what drives them to maybe leave the baby at an orphanage. Like you experienced there in Thailand. But in the United States, there's not many orphanages, but there's lots of abortion clinics. So that desperation leads people to an abortion clinic instead of to deliver that baby. Talk a little bit about the desperation that these women feel when they come in. I think sometimes there's this illusion with folks that it's a free choice. They discern with their doctor, and we hear the usual language that is largely nonsense, because there is not this peaceful, tranquil discernment of do I keep this baby or not. There is just this fear and anxiety. Talk about what that's like for the women that come in.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot more lately, especially since those award shows when we had an actress get up and talk about, my body, my choice, and it was better for my career, and, it was the best decision I made. We have women that come to Mary's Shelter who have had past abortions, of course, and that is not what they say. That is not their mantra. But of course, they don't live in Hollywood. They live in the real world. And when you go into a place like Planned Parenthood, you leave empty and you leave with a bill. And that doesn't make anybody I've ever met, happy afterwards. So that kind of nonsense is just lies, and it's foolish. So they're given that option to not have to be afraid of that. They do not want to take the life of their child.
And you give them the opportunity to live in dignity, right? To have a roof over their head.
Yes, beautiful home.
Yeah, you get them the counseling they need, the help, the education. It's all the things that they're being told that they'll have to forego. You're showing that is not the case. They do not have to do that. That is so beautiful. Do you have any specific stories, any women that really come to mind that maybe are emblematic of the work of Mary's Shelter?
Yeah, I could probably rattle off 100 stories, but
Give me one or two.
that I can remember right now. One short little story, one simple story is a woman who really together young lady, really young, 18. And her family is from a different country. And we've seen this before with some folks from different countries, it's a real dishonor if somebody is pregnant, outside of a marriage. And that was her situation. And her family disowned her for choosing to have the baby. Her boyfriend wanted her to abort the baby. She's 18. She has no place to go. So she decides she's going to have this abortion. And so she goes to my heroes at a pregnancy crisis center that she thought was an abortion facility. And of course, they counseled her and loved her and told her the positives of having her baby and called us. And we were able to provide for her, which in her case was great. But just even if we can't provide for a woman at Mary Shelter, our intake coordinator, Erin, is like incredibly loving and compassionate, and will spend hours on the phone with people, resourcing them to other facilities, many of which we've helped open, or we put them in a hotel, or we'll put them on a couch. We don't want that no room at the inn thing to ever be why a woman would choose to take the life of her baby. So, and since she has come to us, her family has regained a relationship with her. A lot of it's a little secretive. Even the boyfriend has come around. They're not really involved anymore, but she's receiving so much more in the way of support. But since she came to us, she's been going full-time to school as well, which was not an option for her when she was living with her family at that point. It was kind of shunned, kind of not looked, and so she's really made remarkable changes. Another story I can think of right offhand is much sadder. A young lady that came to us, she's not with us anymore because this was going back a couple of years ago, but her story was always so striking to me because she was 17 when she found out she was pregnant, and her mom took her for an abortion, insisted that she had an abortion. And they went to the facility, and it turned out that she was further along than they thought, so they had to reschedule the appointment. And so she thought she was saved. She thought that would be it. Her mother would finally come to her senses, and her mother didn't. And she was brought back, and she was forced to have the abortion, and kind of against her will, I guess entirely against her will. And after the abortion, she was one of those ladies that fell apart a year later. She started drinking, she started harming herself, she was suicidal, fell into the arms of a very abusive man. When you have so little self-esteem and you don't like yourself, that's kind of where you fall. And so she did, and found herself pregnant again. And no way was she going back home to tell her mom. She was only 18 at this point. A lot of our moms are not 18. We have older, but these two happen to be at this age group. And another one of those stories where she went to I believe it was a counselor at a school. It wasn't a crisis pregnancy center. It was somebody that she trusted. I think it was an ex-counselor at one of her schools because she hadn't finished high school. And they did the right thing, and they found resources, and she stayed with us for 3 years, the entire 3 years when she had her child. I cannot say that she went on to this perfect lifestyle, because she really, really suffered not only from her abortion, but from so much more. For a family to do that to you, there's a lot more going on too. But we still I'm in touch with her all the time. She feels loved by us. She knows she can come to us for help. We're very supportive in her life. I know if she were to find herself pregnant again, we would be her first call. It wouldn't be her mom. It would be to us. So, for better or for worse, women just leaving and feeling loved and feeling like they have somebody they can talk to for the rest of their life pretty much is such a blessing. It's just, It's great.
What strikes me, especially with the first story, but especially with the second baby and the second story, is the amount of courage these women have. There's sometimes a sense that they're so broken that they they can't do for themselves all. And it's really that they just need some help. It might not be that they're just incapable. I mean, the amount of courage that you described is considerable. I mean, because you're willing to distance yourself from your family, from everything you know, from your support system, all that stuff, for a baby that's only going to require more of you, right? So you're losing your support system, and your needs are going to grow, and yet they still made, that right decision in the end. Of course, sometimes it's preceded by a tragic mistake, but wow, just that courage is very, very inspirational.
And at the end of the day, they want their babies.
Yeah.
They really want their babies. Again, not one woman has ever regretted actually giving birth. They've regretted past abortions. They've regretted that they thought about an abortion. They cry over that. It's really hard. Not one of them has regretted having that child. That's not a truth. It's not real.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. If people want to learn more about Mary's Shelter, or any of the work you do, what's the best place to go?
Well, if they go to our website, they can find any one of our telephone numbers. I'm always available for phone calls. We get lots of people that come down and visit. They wind up wanting to volunteer and mentor. That's the other thing. We have mentors for all of our moms. So it's not like we're the only ones in their life. We have people in the community that want to be part of their lives as well and help them to doctor appointments and just talk to them and just another solid source for them. But they could just go on our website and look if they're calling if they want to be somebody who's want to come in that capacity. If it's somebody who wants to enter into our homes, same. Go to that website.
What's the website?
If they just type in Mary Shelter Fredericksburg, that's the easiest, but it's www.maryshelterva.org. But just Mary Shelter Fredericksburg is all you need to remember.
Very
and it
good.
Pops right up. And
I know you guys are always needing gifts, you've opened these homes because people have been generous in providing those gifts. So you need help. You also need, none of this is free. So
none of this is free. We don't take any money from the government. We don't take any money from state. It's all private and church donations. So
wonderful.
We're always looking for supporters, donors, prayer warriors, friends.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for everything you do. And thank you for sharing your story today. This was really inspiring. The work you do, but also, the life you've lived has also been very inspiring. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're listening to Searching for More. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a review on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Also, make sure you follow the Diocese and the Arlington Catholic Herald on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to our YouTube channels for regular videos that inspire, educate, and inform about the Catholic faith in our diocesan community.